Hello, welcome to chapter 13 of Greek for the Rest of Us. Today we are going to be going out over pronouns, specifically personal pronouns. We talked a little bit about relative pronouns in chapter 12, but today we are talking about personal pronouns. So, a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun. It stands in place of, functions in place of a noun. As we saw with the relative clause, the relative pronoun was standing in place of a noun in the clause that it was linking the relative clause to. So here we're going to see similar things when it comes to personal pronouns. So here we're talking about English first. So the person, pronouns can be in the first, second, or third person. So just one note here, this can be a little bit confusing for some people. We are not talking about the number, not the number of people. So this is not one person, two person, or three persons. It's talking about from the vantage point of first person being either I or we, myself, kind of like the immediate sphere. And then second person would be the kind of sphere immediately connected to that person of you. Like if I or we are addressing you is that second person. And then the third person would be kind of even further, there's less of a personal connection, kind of further out would be third person of he, she, it, they. Certainly that may be a he or a she that's very close, but from the perspective grammatically, he or she is distant from the speaker, whereas I is the speaker himself, or you is directly connected to the speaker somehow. He, she, or it might be rather distant from the speaker, and is certainly grammatically distant from the speaker. So in English we have one, it's just highly inflected. We actually have a lot of inflection here, which is why we've already used it as an illustration in previous chapters. But we have the subjective, possessive, objective cases, and then those are either in the singular or in the plural. So we have I or we, my or me, our or us for those possessives. And then similar with second person, we have some inflection where you have your for the possessive, but you'll notice that we don't have any distinction between plurals. So your backpack is the same as if addressing the whole class, I would say your grades. And your grades could be referring to an individual, or it could be referring to the collective grades of the class. And then the third person pronoun in English is considerably inflected. So we also have inflection based on gender for third person, masculine, feminine, or neuter. He, she, it, his, her, its, him, her, it, and then they, their, them. Note that we don't have, I should do that, right? We do not have feminine or neuter third person plural pronouns. Or I guess I should say we don't distinguish between masculine and feminine for those. We do have them, we just only have them in the masculine form. And it's the same for feminine, and for neuter. So jumping now into the Greek first and second personal pronouns. For the Greek personal pronouns, just like English, the number, so whether it's singular or plural, and the gender is going to be determined by the antecedent being the noun previous, the previous noun in the sentence. So if you have, say, we use Tom as an example a lot, but if we say Tom went to the mall and he bought a candle, he is singular because Tom is singular, and he is masculine because Tom is masculine. But the case is governed by function. So in the case of the example, he went to the store, Tom went to the store and he bought milk. Well, there he is still the subject in that second clause, but he is also subjective case. But you could have a situation where the function is different in the second clause, but you would still have a pronoun, but it would be then him. So Tom went to the store and I bought a coat for him. So then I know him is referring to Tom, but him is not in the subjective case. So it's going to be the same in Greek is basically all that we're saying there. So 13.6 says you should memorize this. You don't have to, but it will help you in your reading. This is the first person personal pronouns. Ego is the lexical form. So ego would be how you would look it up in a dictionary or a lexicon. But then it's going to be inflected. Ego, mu. This is called the emphatic form here. I'm going to highlight this in a different color. So emphatic forms are these ones in brackets or parentheses. And as you see here at 13.7, the emphatic forms have the same basic meaning, but you'll just see them show up in two different ways. And this is usually having a little bit more emphasis, so that emphatic or maybe a repetitious element. But you have to look at context. Basically, you're just going to see those show up in two different ways, and it has to do with the accent mainly, or the addition of the epsilon. So ego, mu, moi, me, hemes, and then hemon, hemin, hemas, and then very similar for the second person pronoun. Again, su would be how you'd look it up in a lexicon. That's the lexical form. But then this is, as you see, we comment on this regularly when we encounter passages where there's the plural you, but it's not conveyed in our translations. We would say, well, here we have in our English translation, you, but this is actually, if we're dealing with a plural, this would actually be more like y'all. Because again, it's saying it's plural, but our English is confined to being the same English word, even though the Greek word does convey the difference between singular and plural. So just note that you can have plural pronouns that have to be translated singularly in English, and it's tricky to work around, and different translations handle it different ways. So that's the emphatic form. Again, you don't have to memorize this, but it would be useful to have this in mind as you're working through translation work and encountering different pronouns. So that's the first and second pronouns. And then the third person pronouns. Whoa, zoomed way out there. All right, so the third person pronoun, here we have, as you can see, a lot of inflection. So where we have a bit of inflection here, they have what we don't have. If you remember, down here, this section is the section we do not have over in English, specifically the feminine and the neuter forms in the plural, which just means that with all of this available, there's quite a bit of specificity available in Greek. The Greek speaker can pull out the exact pronoun that he wants for the job. Now, that said, keep in mind that there are some of these that are the same. So like masculine dative singular and neuter dative singular, auto, same word there, same form, it's going to look the same, but it has a different meaning, masculine or neuter. So you have to see what's it modifying or what's it near to have a better understanding of whether or not we're referring to a neuter or a masculine. So again, just the lexical form here is going to be this autos. Autos is going to be, that's how you look that up in a lexicon. So autos is the word to know here, and then your software is going to be telling you, if you highlight on a word like autane, it would tell you this is a feminine accusative singular third person pronoun. So that is the Greek third person pronoun paradigm. Again, you don't have to memorize it, but good to know. There are, and this you do want to know, the three basic uses of autos. So the form autos, the letters itself as it appears, are going to be performing three main uses or functions. So these are the three functions that you're going to be encountering for autos and its various inflections. So the most common, and the first one, is the third person personal pronoun. So just like the way we use it in English is when you encounter he or autos, it's referring back to its antecedent and it's functioning in the place of. So this is basically, you could think of this use as the substitute. I did not spell that right. Substitute. You get the idea. It's substituting for the antecedent. So that's the first use, third person personal pronoun. The second use is the intensive use, and then the third is, in 1316, identical adjective. So first, the intensive use. Autos can function intensively when used adjectively. So adjectively, when it's modifying a noun, in this usage, autos modifies another word, and it's usually in the predicate position, if you remember our section on modifiers in chapter 11. So here we have autos gar ha Herodes apostelos ekratesin ton ionian. So autos there is obviously the word we're looking at because that's the only pronoun we see in here. But here we have, right off the bat, we have a pronoun, but then we have what it refers to also, and it's not in the context of there's no verb for this to modify, no verb that it's modifying, or not modifying. There's no verb that it's serving as the subject of. There's no verb that it's serving as the object of. There's no, because it's not genitive, so it's not modifying Herod in a possessive sense. So it's not like for his Herod. So because it's in the nominative, and you have Herod here is in the nominative, we know autos is modifying Herod, and since it's in the nominative, and it's not modifying it as a possessive, we would translate it as Herod himself to kind of add that emphasis. Now in English, we have an actual word to do that. So we don't have to say, Herod him had sent for and attested John. But if you think through the fact that they didn't have that or didn't use that, we would understand why they would use autos for that. And you can see the emphasis here when you have already within the word seized here, ekratesin, you already have third person singular. So you already know, okay, the subject is he. So then you have Herod on top of that, and then you also have himself. All of these are serving to really put the emphasis on Herod was actively doing this. Herod himself did this. So when you see autos, and it's not functioning kind of independently as a pronoun, then himself as an intensive, or herself or itself, is a viable option. And then in 1316, we have the identical adjective. So autos is sometimes used as the identical adjective, meaning same. So kai pollen epelthon proseuxata ton auton logon. So here we have auton is functioning, it's in the accusative, ton, auton, logon. So what did he pray? we know this is all the direct object of prayer. So he prayed the word, and then auton tells us, because this is in the accusative, just like logon, it's modifying word or logon. But again, because it's not in the genitive, it's not going to be a possessive, so it's not functioning as an independent pronoun separate from this thought here. And you could kind of think through, would intensive work for this? The word itself, he prayed the word itself. That could be, that's possible. But part of the indication here is usually in the predicate position is the hint for intensive, if you remember, usually in the predicate position. And because here we have article, adjective, and then noun, it's a more likely situation that we have an identical adjective or the same word, which has a very similar connotation to the word itself. But the word itself is kind of emphasizing, it's emphasizing the word, intensifying the word, I guess you could say, whereas the identical use is kind of probably referring back to something previous, the same word. So again, having Paul in there clues us into, okay, I have to look previous into the context if I'm going to fully understand this sentence. All right. So now on to demonstrative pronouns. We talked about personal pronouns. Now we're talking about demonstrative pronouns. Just a very short section here, 13.17. The demonstrative pronouns, just like what we have in English, where we have a near demonstrative and a far demonstrative. So our near demonstrative is this or these. And that doesn't necessarily mean geographically near, but in general there's going to be kind of a spatial sense to, am I talking about this coat or am I talking about that coat? This coat, in that, if I say this and that, so near and far, is that or those. If I say this or that, say I'm holding one pencil in my hand, and there's one pencil that's over on another desk, and I say this pencil and that pencil, even without seeing what's going on, you know that this pencil refers to the pencil that's in my hand, whereas that pencil refers to a pencil that's far away. So that's the idea of a demonstrative pronoun. And in the case of, I was just using as an example, this pencil, this is functioning adjectively, but you could also have it function in a more substantive way, like how did this happen? The thing that happened is this. And this is kind of a close thing. So if I walked into the room and saw something that had happened, I would say, how did this happen? But if I say, how did that happen? Maybe I'm referring to an event that happened in the past. I'm not in the room. I didn't personally encounter it. So I'd say, how did that happen? All that to say, in Greek, they have the same ability to express that through hutos. Note the rough breathing mark there. Hutos. And then there's multiple inflections for this, for whether it's singular or plural, whether and how it's functioning in the sentence, nominative, accusative, etc. So hutos, with that omicron there, and then ekainos. Ekainos is going to be the equivalent of that or those. Again, they function the same way as the demonstratives do in English, so both as pronouns or as adjectives, as we were just seeing in the example of this pencil being an adjective, or how did this happen being a pronoun, or functioning substantively as a noun, as a pronoun. So that is the demonstrative pronouns. Just going to briefly go through our vocabulary. So we have oudes, which means no one or nothing. Heautu, himself, herself, itself. Hamartia, sin. Namas, law. And again, I just paused to mention that as we're learning, you are learning one gloss for this word, which means you're only learning one sense, not even really learning one sense. You're just learning a gloss, one word that you could quickly convey this in English. But there is a whole spectrum of meaning with so many of these. And law is a great example of that. Law, namas, does not always mean law in the sense we would think of it. But for purpose of memory, I will get off the hobby horse of talking about senses. Namas, we're learning as law. Charis, grace. Ergon, work or deed. Doxa, glory. Cardia, heart. Care, hand. There we go. That is chapter 13. Thank you.